The email arrived at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was wrapping up a client call that had secured us another $1 million contract. Please report to HR immediately. It read, signed by someone I'd never heard of. After 17 years of bleeding for Sterling & Associates, after building their client portfolio from scratch, after missing my daughter's school plays and my father's birthday dinners, they were about to make the biggest mistake of their corporate lives. My name is Catherine Morrison, and I'm about to tell you how I brought down the company that thought they could discard me like yesterday's coffee grounds. I'd started at Sterling & Associates straight out of business school, back when the firm was a modest consulting outfit with big dreams and bigger egos. The office was smaller then, crammed into 2 floors of a downtown building that smelled perpetually of burnt coffee and broken dreams. I was 25, ambitious, and naive enough to believe that hard work and loyalty would be rewarded with something more than a gold watch and a pension plan. Marcus Sterling, the founder, had hired me personally. He was the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. Not because he was particularly tall or handsome, but because he possessed that rare combination of charm and ruthlessness that made people want to both impress and fear him. "You've got fire," he told me during my interview, leaning back in his leather chair with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We need fire here." And fire I brought. In my first year, I landed 3 major clients, including Thomson Industries, a manufacturing giant that would become our bread and butter for the next decade and a half. By year 3, I was running my own accounts. By year 5, I was training new hires. By year 10, I was practically running the client services division single-handedly. The company grew around me like a tree around a fence post. We moved to a gleaming 40-story tower in the financial district. The 2 floors became 10. The handful of employees became hundreds. And through it all, I remained the constant, the one person who knew where all the bodies were buried and how to keep the clients happy. My 12 major clients represented roughly 60% of Sterling & Associates' revenue. I'd cultivated these relationships over years, sometimes decades. I knew their CEOs' children's names, their quarterly projections, their deepest fears about market volatility. I'd held their hands through hostile takeovers, guided them through regulatory nightmares, and celebrated their victories as if they were my own. Thomson Industries was my crown jewel. James Thomson III, the CEO, once told me I was the smartest person he'd ever met in consulting. "You don't just solve problems, Catherine," he'd said over dinner at Le Bernardin. "You anticipate them. That's worth its weight in gold." Then there was Meridian Financial, an investment firm I'd helped navigate through the 2008 crisis. Bradley Meridian, their managing partner, credited me with saving his company. "Without your strategic restructuring plan, we would have gone under." He'd written in a recommendation letter I'd never needed to use. "Catherine Morrison is not just a consultant, she's a miracle worker." The pattern was the same with all of them. Blackstone Tech, where I'd helped them pivot from hardware to software. Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals, where I'd guided them through FDA approval processes. Northwind Energy, where I'd orchestrated their expansion into renewable resources. Each relationship was built on trust, expertise, and countless hours of going above and beyond. But success, I learned, can be a double-edged sword in the corporate world. The first sign of trouble came 18 months ago when Marcus Sterling announced his retirement. The company was being sold to Hartwell Corporation, a massive conglomerate known for aggressive cost-cutting and efficiency optimization. The buzzwords alone should have been warning enough. The new management team arrived like a plague of locusts in expensive suits. They spoke in acronyms and spreadsheets, viewing relationships as line items and loyalty as a liability. The new CEO, David Hartwell Jr., was a thin, pale man in his early 40s who'd never worked in consulting, but had an MBA from Wharton and a reputation for turning companies around by cutting them to the bone. "We're going to revolutionize this industry," he announced at the first all-hands meeting. "No more of this old-school relationship management. We're moving to a data-driven, scalable model." I should have seen it coming. The writing was on the wall in quarterly reviews that suddenly focused on optimization opportunities and redundancy assessments. The warm relationship I'd had with Marcus Sterling was replaced by cold efficiency reports and metrics that seemed designed to minimize human contribution. But I was too busy keeping my clients happy to pay attention to the changing political landscape. While the new management team plotted their restructuring, I was closing deals, solving problems, and maintaining the relationships that kept their lights on. The irony wasn't lost on me. As they planned to fire me, I was literally in the process of securing the largest contract in company history. Apex Corporation, a Fortune 500 company, was about to sign a 5-year consulting agreement worth $15 million. I'd been courting them for 8 months, navigating their complex corporate structure and winning over their notoriously difficult board of directors. That Tuesday afternoon, as I finished the call with Apex's CEO confirming their commitment, I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't experienced in months. Despite all the corporate upheaval, despite the new management's obvious disdain for the old guard, I was still delivering results, which made the walk to HR feel like a death march. The Human Resources Department had been relocated to the 35th floor, a sterile environment of beige cubicles and motivational posters that felt more like a medical facility than a place where people worked. Patricia Williams, the new HR director, was waiting for me in a conference room that smelled like industrial carpet and broken dreams. "Catherine," she said without looking up from her laptop. "Please, have a seat." I sat across from her, noting the manila folder on the table and the presence of 2 other people I didn't recognize. One was a man in his 50s with the demeanor of someone who'd been hired specifically to deliver bad news. The other was a younger woman taking notes on a tablet. "I'm sure you're wondering why we asked you to come in," Patricia continued, finally making eye contact. "We've been conducting a comprehensive review of our operations, and we've identified several areas where we need to make strategic adjustments." The corporate euphemisms were already starting. Strategic adjustments, optimization, right-sizing. I'd heard them all before, usually right before someone's career went up in flames. "As part of our efficiency initiative," she continued, "we've decided to restructure the client services division. We're moving to a team-based approach that will allow us to serve our clients more effectively while reducing overhead." "Reducing overhead," I repeated slowly. "You mean firing people?" "We prefer to think of it as optimization." The man in the suit interjected, "The market has changed, Catherine. Clients don't want the old model of relationship-based consulting. They want data-driven solutions, scalable processes, and cost-effective delivery." I almost laughed. These people had clearly never sat across from a CEO who was about to lose $50 million on a bad investment, or held a CFO's hand while they navigated a hostile takeover. Relationships weren't just nice-to-haves in this business, they were everything. "What about my clients?" I asked. "Thomson Industries has been with us for 15 years. They specifically requested me for their upcoming merger consultation." "That's part of the beauty of our new system," Patricia said, consulting her notes. "Your clients will be transitioned to our new team-based model. They'll have access to multiple specialists instead of relying on a single point of contact." The ignorance was breathtaking. These people were about to destroy relationships that had taken decades to build, and they thought they could replace them with a flowchart and a customer service protocol. "And my role in all this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Unfortunately, your position is being eliminated," Patricia said. "However, we're prepared to offer you a very generous severance package, 6 months' salary, continued health benefits, and a positive reference. 6 months' salary for 17 years of service, for building their client base from nothing, for generating hundreds of millions in revenue, for sacrificing weekends and holidays and family time. This is effective immediately," she added, as if reading my thoughts. "We'll need your company laptop, access cards, and any client files you may have." The dismissal was swift and efficient. Within an hour, I was escorted to my office to pack my personal belongings while a security guard watched. My colleagues averted their eyes as I walked past, either out of embarrassment or fear that whatever I had might be contagious. 17 years of my life fit into 2 cardboard boxes. Photos of my daughter's graduation, a few books, some awards that suddenly seemed meaningless, and a coffee mug that read, World's Best Consultant. A gift from James Thompson after I'd helped him navigate a particularly difficult regulatory challenge. As I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at those boxes in my back seat, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, unadulterated rage. Not the frustration of a difficult client or the annoyance of a missed deadline, but the kind of fury that burns cold and clear and focused. They thought they could discard me like a piece of outdated equipment. They thought my relationships were transferable assets that could be reassigned to whoever was willing to work for less. They thought 17 years of loyalty and expertise could be replaced with a PowerPoint presentation and a customer service script. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through the implications of what had just happened, my mortgage payment, my daughter's college tuition, the life I'd built that was suddenly balanced on a very precarious edge. But as I pulled into my driveway and saw the lights on in my house, something clicked into place. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every person who'd ever been discarded by a company that valued spreadsheets over human relationships. This was about showing these corporate raiders what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and a legal pad, mapping out my strategy. I'd built my career on understanding leverage, on knowing where the pressure points were in any given situation. Now I was going to use that knowledge for myself. The first thing I needed to understand was the legal landscape. My employment contract had a non-compete clause, but it was narrowly defined and poorly written. I couldn't work for a direct competitor for 6 months, but there was nothing preventing me from starting my own firm. There was also nothing preventing me from having conversations with former clients about their satisfaction with Sterling & Associates' new service model. The second thing I needed was allies. 17 years in the business had given me more than just client relationships. I had connections with vendors, subcontractors, and other consultants who'd worked with Sterling & Associates over the years. More importantly, I had relationships with talented people who'd been let go in previous rounds of optimization. By the end of the week, I had a plan. I started with Michael Rodriguez, a brilliant analyst who'd been laid off 6 months earlier when the new management decided his position was redundant. Michael had been with the company for 8 years and had a gift for data analysis that bordered on supernatural. He was currently freelancing and, according to his LinkedIn profile, not entirely happy about it. "Catherine," he said when I called him, "I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry. Those bastards don't know what they're doing." "That's exactly what I want to talk to you about," I said. "Are you free for coffee?" We met at a small cafe downtown, away from the financial district where we might run into former colleagues. Michael looked tired but determined, the expression of someone who'd been knocked down but wasn't staying down. "I'm starting my own firm," I told him directly. "I want you to be my first hire." His eyes widened. "Catherine, that's incredible. But can you do that? Don't you have a non-compete?" "I've had 3 different lawyers look at it," I said. "It's enforceable for 6 months, but it's specific to traditional consulting services. If I structure this right, as a strategic advisory firm focused on specialized client relationships, I'm in the clear." "What about clients?" I smiled. "Let me worry about that." Over the next 2 weeks, I assembled my team. Michael Rodriguez for analysis and strategy, Jennifer Walsh, a project manager who'd been laid off in the first round of cuts, David Park, a communications specialist who'd quit rather than work under the new regime, and finally, Amanda Foster, a junior consultant who'd been on my team before the restructuring. Each of them had their own reasons for wanting to see Sterling & Associates fail. Michael was bitter about being discarded after 8 years of service. Jennifer was angry about losing her pension contributions. David was disgusted by the new management's treatment of long-term employees. Amanda was ambitious and saw an opportunity to advance faster in a smaller firm. But more than that, they were all talented professionals who'd been undervalued and overlooked. They were hungry, motivated, and ready to prove themselves. While I was building my team, I was also having conversations with my former clients. Not business conversations, of course, that would have violated my non-compete, just friendly check-ins to see how they were adjusting to the new service model at Sterling and Associates. The calls were illuminating. James Thompson was frustrated. They assigned me to some kid who looks like he's barely out of college, he complained. He keeps talking about synergies and optimization matrices, but he doesn't understand our business. Yesterday, he suggested we outsource our quality control to save money. Quality control. Catherine, that's what differentiates us from our competitors. Bradley Meridian was more direct. They're trying to manage me by committee, he said. I have 3 different people calling me about different aspects of the same project. None of them seem to talk to each other, and none of them understand the nuances of our regulatory environment. The story was the same across the board. Apex Corporation, the Fortune 500 company whose $15 million contract I'd secured on my last day, was already expressing concerns about the transition. We signed with Sterling and Associates because of you. Their CEO told me during a social lunch. Now they're telling us we'll be working with their optimization team. It feels like we're being processed rather than served. By the end of my first month of unemployment, I had a clear picture of the chaos that had engulfed Sterling and Associates. The new management's efficiency model was efficient at only one thing, alienating the clients who generated their revenue. But I was patient. I had learned patience from 17 years of playing the long game, of building relationships that paid dividends over time. I would wait for the right moment to make my move. That moment came sooner than expected. 6 weeks after my termination, I received a call from Thomson Industries' legal department. They were having issues with a regulatory compliance matter and were dissatisfied with the support they were receiving from Sterling and Associates. The junior consultant assigned to their account had missed a critical filing deadline, potentially exposing Thomson Industries to significant fines. We need someone who understands our business, James Thompson told me. Someone who can fix this mess before it gets worse. I explained that my non-compete prevented me from working with them directly, but I could refer them to someone who might be able to help. That someone was Morrison Strategic Advisory, the firm I'd been quietly setting up over the past month. I can't be directly involved, I told him, but I have a team of highly qualified consultants who specialize in regulatory compliance. They're former Sterling and Associates employees who understand your business. The irony was perfect. Sterling and Associates had created their own competition by discarding their most valuable employees. Now those same employees were being hired to fix the problems created by Sterling and Associates' new efficiency model. Thomson Industries became Morrison Strategic Advisory's first client. The contract was worth $2 million, not coincidentally. Exactly what they'd been paying Sterling and Associates for the same services. Within a week, I had similar conversations with 3 other former clients. Each of them had stories of missed deadlines, communication breakdowns, and junior consultants who didn't understand their businesses. Each of them was looking for alternatives. The beauty of the situation was that I didn't have to solicit them. They came to me, frustrated and looking for the kind of personalized service they'd grown accustomed to over the years. I was simply providing a solution to a problem that Sterling and Associates had created. By the end of my second month, Morrison Strategic Advisory had signed contracts with 6 of my former clients. The total value was just over $12 million, roughly 20% of Sterling and Associates' annual revenue. But I wasn't done yet. The key to my strategy was understanding that relationships in the consulting business aren't just about personal chemistry, they're about trust, reliability, and results. My former clients hadn't just been buying consulting services from Sterling and Associates, they'd been buying peace of mind. They'd been buying the confidence that comes from working with someone who understands your business, your challenges, and your goals. Sterling and Associates' new model had stripped away that peace of mind and replaced it with process documents and efficiency metrics. They'd turned consulting into a commodity, and commodities are easily replaced. 3 months after my termination, I was ready to make my final move. I called a meeting with the remaining 6 clients who were still with Sterling and Associates. Not a sales meeting, That would have been too obvious and potentially problematic from a legal standpoint. Instead, I invited them to a networking event hosted by Morrison Strategic Advisory. The event was held at the Riverside Club, an exclusive venue overlooking the harbor. The guest list included CEOs, CFOs, and other senior executives from various industries. The topic was the future of strategic consulting in a digital age. I'd structured the event carefully. Rather than pitching my services, I facilitated discussions about the challenges facing businesses in the current environment. I talked about the importance of adaptability, the value of experienced counsel, and the risk of prioritizing efficiency over effectiveness. The subtext was clear to anyone who'd been dealing with Sterling & Associates' new service model. During the cocktail hour, I had private conversations with each of my former clients. I didn't ask for their business, I didn't need to. Instead, I listened as they shared their frustrations, their concerns, and their growing doubts about their current consulting relationship. "We're not getting the same level of service," one CEO confided. "The new team is technically competent, but they don't understand our industry. They keep proposing solutions that might work for other companies but don't fit our specific needs. It feels like we're being managed by a call center." Another added, "Everything is process-driven, but business isn't just about processes. Sometimes you need someone who can think outside the box." By the end of the evening, I had expressions of interest from all 6 remaining clients. They didn't want to abandon Sterling & Associates immediately. That would have been too disruptive to their operations. But they wanted to explore alternatives for their upcoming projects. Over the next 6 weeks, all 6 clients gradually transitioned their work to Morrison Strategic Advisory. Some canceled existing contracts with Sterling & Associates. Others simply chose not to renew when their agreements expired. A few restructured their consulting relationships, moving their most critical projects to my firm while keeping routine work with Sterling & Associates. The result was devastating for Sterling & Associates. In less than 6 months, they'd lost 12 major clients representing approximately 60% of their revenue. The efficiency gains they'd achieved by firing experienced consultants were more than offset by the loss of the business those consultants had generated. But the real impact went beyond just the lost revenue. In the consulting business, reputation is everything. Word travels fast in the corporate world, and soon other companies were hearing about Sterling & Associates' service problems. Potential clients began asking pointed questions about their new business model. Existing clients started demanding assurances about service quality. The company that had been built on relationships was discovering that relationships, once broken, are extremely difficult to repair. Meanwhile, Morrison Strategic Advisory was thriving. My team had grown to 15 consultants, all of them former Sterling & Associates employees who'd been victims of various efficiency initiatives. We were profitable, growing, and building the kind of reputation that takes years to establish. The final blow came 8 months after my termination. David Hartwell Jr., the CEO who'd orchestrated my firing, was himself terminated by the board of directors. The official reason was strategic differences regarding the company's direction. But everyone in the industry knew the real reason. He'd destroyed a profitable business by prioritizing spreadsheets over relationships. I learned about his firing from James Thompson, who called to congratulate me on my success. "I heard the news," he said. "I can't say I'm surprised. You can't run a relationship business with an efficiency model." "What's happening to Sterling & Associates?" I asked. "They're trying to rebuild," he said. Marcus Sterling came out of retirement to try to save the company. He's been calling around, trying to understand what went wrong. Word is they're looking to hire experienced consultants to replace the ones they fired. The irony was complete. The company that had discarded experienced professionals in favor of cheap efficiency was now desperately trying to hire experienced professionals to save their business. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Relationships that had taken decades to build had been destroyed in a matter of months. Trust that had been earned through years of reliable service had been lost through a series of missed deadlines and communication failures. A year after my termination, Sterling & Associates was acquired by a competitor in a fire sale. The company that had once been valued at over $100 million was sold for less than $20 million. Most of the employees were laid off. The offices were closed. The Sterling and Associates name disappeared from the corporate landscape. Morrison Strategic Advisory, meanwhile, had grown into a $15 million business with 30 employees and a client base that included some of the most prestigious companies in the region. We'd won several industry awards and had been featured in business publications as an example of successful entrepreneurship. More importantly, we'd built the kind of culture that I'd always wanted to work in. We valued relationships over processes, quality over quantity, and people over profits. We treated our employees like partners and our clients like family. The consulting business, I'd learned, isn't really about consulting at all. It's about understanding people, building trust, and delivering results. It's about being there when your clients need you, anticipating their challenges, and helping them navigate through uncertainty. Sterling and Associates had forgotten those fundamentals in their pursuit of efficiency. They treated their employees like expenses to be minimized and their clients like accounts to be managed. They'd optimized everything except the things that actually mattered. As I sat in my new office, looking out at the harbor through floor-to-ceiling windows, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The termination that had seemed like a catastrophe had actually been an opportunity. The betrayal that had filled me with rage had ultimately led to redemption. They thought they could fire me and move on with their lives. They thought my relationships were transferable assets that could be reassigned to whoever was willing to work for less. They thought 17 years of loyalty and expertise could be replaced with a PowerPoint presentation and a customer service script. They were wrong about everything. In the end, the revenge wasn't about anger or spite. It was about proving that relationships matter, that experience has value, and that loyalty should be a two-way street. It was about showing that you can't build a successful business by discarding the people who made it successful in the first place. Sterling and Associates had fired me after 17 years, thinking they could replace me with someone cheaper and more efficient. Instead, I took their 12 major clients, their best employees, and their reputation. And I built something better. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, sometimes it's getting ahead. As I prepared to leave the office for my daughter's college graduation, an event I wouldn't have to miss because of a last-minute client crisis, I smiled at the thought of how different my life had become. I was no longer just an employee trading time for money. I was an entrepreneur building something meaningful. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was a potential client who'd heard about our work and wanted to discuss a major project. As I answered the call, I realized that this was just the beginning. Sterling and Associates was history. Morrison Strategic Advisory was the future. And I was just getting started.